was living in my car. The thing is that's so fragile about this story is that nobody knew that I was doing this. I was deeply ashamed of it.
You're the #1 real estate team in Palm Beach County. You specialize in athletes and celebrities. You've sold over hundreds of homes to pro athletes. One of the founding agents at Compass with a 20-plus person team, competitive soccer player in college, and above all this, you've launched a real estate training company called Real Estating. And you also just launched Hype Boss, which is a creative agency and branding studio. And then you have 3 kids. So you do all this stuff.
There's so much misunderstanding around what it takes to be an agent that sells luxury. I am not that professional suited up type person. I went so far out of my way to try to be like the selling sunset chick, and I am not that. I'm very, very transparent about what my weaknesses are. I needed to make these 3 major mistakes to be able to get to a place where I am now. The first was
PR is something you've been doing for a while. I've noticed you're on the news all the time. You get all these opportunities. What is the secret? How do you even get PR?
Okay, so I love this question.
Appreciate you joining, Holly. You're the #1 real estate team in Palm Beach County. You specialize in athletes and celebrities in the Compass Sports and Entertainment. You've sold over hundreds of homes to pro athletes. One of the founding agents at Compass with a 20-plus person team. You moved 13 times growing up between US and Germany. Competitive soccer player in high school and college. And above all this, you've launched a real estate training company called Real Estating, which bridges the gap between agents, what they're taught in real estate, and actually selling homes. You have the chief code, which is kind of I think it's like a chief of staff placement almost. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And you also just launched Hype Boss, which is a creative agency and branding studio.
Basically all the things that I've personally needed. I'm well, if it doesn't exist, we'll build it.
Which is crazy because your husband, he's a coach for the Florida Mariners, right?
San Francisco Giants.
San Francisco Giants, sorry. And then you have 3 kids, bless your heart, 3 boys. I was raised with 2 brothers, so.
Oh, you were? What?
Yeah.
Where are you in the birth order?
In the middle.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
My middle son is, and it's funny, I say this all the time, he is my spirit animal. He is the creative, the entrepreneur, he's little, classic middle child. I can see that with you, Andrew. I can see you being the middle.
Yeah. I appreciate that. So you do all this stuff, which is crazy. And I want to start with a quote from you. You say your vibe attracts your tribe, and be unapologetically who you are. And authenticity is it's this huge buzzword right now. So why is that important? And especially in the luxury market, where people can often, because I hear it all the time with agents, and they say they feel like they have to kind of put up this front almost to enter the luxury market.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me about that?
Yeah, it's oh my gosh, I could talk about this forever. The luxury space, there's so much misunderstanding around what it takes to be an agent that sells luxury. I think the narrative around it is that you have to be this, buttoned up, either this buttoned up professional, suited up, even though I'm wearing a blazer right now. I am not that professional suited up type person, but when I first started trying to break into luxury, I tried to be. I went so far out of my way to try to be a hybrid between the selling sunset chicks and the owners of that company, the Oppenheim guys. And I am not that at all. You and I were just talking about this. I cuss like a sailor. I'm pretty slangy. I own a company called Hype Boss and the chief code. I'm very, I just am not the traditional brand of luxury, and that's okay because people that are going to be attracted to my authenticity and who I am are they're going to find me. And I talk about this all the time that in luxury, like there's this wild misconception for what what people think that or how people think that they should be. And the reality is, in the luxury space, it's just luxury is, in real estate especially, is it's a level of service. It is a price point, but if you're just yourself, you'll attract people who want to pay that price point, regardless of how just be you, be you. Your
Yeah.
vibe will attract your tribe.
And I think that's like such a big deal because there is kind of like a stigma, whether it's from like the TV shows or whatever, people feel like they have to be something. But
Yeah.
when I look at you, like there's another top team leader, he talked about you. He's like, the one thing that like really I admire Holly about, she's just authentically like herself on social. And it's like, that's something that's like huge. And kind of what kind of threads this together is like someone that we know mutually, Ben Moss. Like he's just very genuine, and
100%.
you
I
kind of
love it. I love Ben as an example. Ben's my favorite example because he is a dear friend of mine. And it's funny actually, going forward, I should probably start using him as the avatar for what I'm trying to describe. Because when I first started, it's almost like I want to like re-give you that answer from before. When I first started, I tried to be like Ben Moss, and I am not like Ben Moss. Ben Moss is on time. He is professional. He is like I am the chaos boss. And of course I have the ability to be on time and to, be buttoned up and be professional. But the perception that Ben gives is different because that's who he is in his core. And the perception that I give is like the vast majority of my clients are baseball wives or professional athlete wives who have like 30 seconds to meet about their home sale because their kid is, they're transferring them schools, and, their house might be a little bit of a mess, and they need to get the realtor thing checked off, and they just want to trust that I've got it. And that's the vibe that I give out. Like I'm like you, I feel like whenever I talk about this, I lean into the fact that I'm chaotic, and I'm not. But it's a good juxtaposition. Like if you compare how Ben is and how I am, it's like two very different brands,
yeah.
and it's okay. Both work. Like it's okay. Just don't try to be something that you're not. And conversely too, if you're like someone like Ben, like trying to be me won't work. The energy will be misaligned.
I look at someone like Tim Ferriss. Like Tim Ferriss, I don't think came from money. He's someone who really built himself up to be who he is, and now billionaires like want to be around him. Like they want to be with him because of what he did. And do you think it has to do with like something when you don't come from like a certain level and you try to enter that in a business, like you feel like you have to put off something?
Yeah, that's a really good read. I think, especially in the luxury space. So growing up, my parents declared bankruptcy 2 different times. Once they had a travel agency in the 90s and had to shut it down. And then in the recession, they lost their home. But my mom always worked at the private school where I went to school. So because she worked there, I was able to go to school among these like very bougie, it's called the Munich International School. It's one of the most, like one of the best schools in literally the world. So having that chip on my shoulder that and kids used to say that all the time, like literally pointed out that like, well, you only go here because your mom goes here, like, the little shithead rich kids. My friends are amazing, and everyone that I am close with that went to MIS is amazing. However, you get this like chip on your shoulder if you're trying to be something that you're just not. So leaning into, and I love how Tim Ferriss does this, leaning into just being who you are, take it or leave it, not pretending to, you can sniff that out immediately. Like, listen, I sell real estate in the Palm Beach area, right? People
Yep.
that live in Jupiter, this is really unique. People that live in Jupiter very specifically want to live, especially the ones that live on Jupiter Island that have these, $10 million, $20 million, $60 million homes. They can live on Palm Beach Island if they wanted to, but they live in Jupiter because they don't want to be around that. They don't need to be around that. Now, on the other side of that, people that live on Palm Beach Island live and love the lifestyle on Palm Beach Island. Palm Beach Island is more bougie. I compare it a lot to like Beverly Hills and Calabasas, how or La Jolla, like just being like you don't need to be in the hustle and bustle of, and it literally boils down to your vibe, attracting your tribe, and leaning into whatever your vibe is, just being okay with that It's
Yeah.
authenticity. Like all of it is authenticity.
And you kind of mentioned something that I kind of want to touch on because like, you talked about at one point, like your parents losing your job, declaring bankruptcy while you're in college, and then
Mhm.
you having to live in a car for like a short stint and like really supporting yourself. How did that like impact you and change you?
So in college, it was like within a very short amount of time. I played soccer and I had transferred twice, and within a very short amount of time, I became NCAA ineligible because of how my transfer had worked. And then my parents had to foreclose on their home. And um, when I talk about this period of time where I was living in my car, I don't want to take away from people who actually like full on have to live in their cars. I would
Hmm.
bartend at night and then I would sleep on campus in my car with literally everything that I owned, literally in packed in my car. And then I would, if I didn't have and then I would shower at the rec, go to class, go to work, and then do it all over again. And it was very easy. And this only lasted a period of, a couple weeks. But if I had, a friend where I could go and spend the night, at their house, the thing is that's so fragile about this story is that nobody knew that I was doing this. It was deeply, deeply, I was deeply ashamed of it. And it also, because of how easy it was, I just didn't, like, I almost didn't want to, like, woe is me talk about it. And I think it's something that millennials right now who have parents that lost a home during the recession or lost a job who were mid stride in college. So anyone that graduated high school from 2003 through, I would say, 2008, like if you graduate high school in that band, you probably have a friend that this happened to, where their parents lost everything and they were just kind of mid coming of age. And it impacts our housing market in a really interesting way because it's created this like gun shyness to pull the trigger in a hot, high market. Like I see millennial buyers being really, really gun shy about committing because they saw what their parents went through.
That's interesting. But I I guess because like we kind of just bought a house, so like I wasn't really gun shy. Um,
Yeah, same, same. I was like all in. Like I bought a house the second, like literally the second I could, I bought a house. And it's funny, like I think about it every day, like how blessed we are to have bought, 10 years ago when interest rates were, at a decent rate. And
yeah,
my heart is always with the millennials when they're gun shy over it because I get it. Like I can always sense when my spidey senses are always like 10 for 10 if they were in college and mid stride and if they had, if the recession really impacted them. But for me, like it always was like I bartended at four different bars in Knoxville, Tennessee. And I like on Thursday I worked at one place, Friday one place, Saturday at one place, and Sunday another because the good nights were on Thursday was one, right? And so
yeah,
I went to and I basically just told literally the owners and the managers of these bars like I'm the best bartender in this town, so you want me on Thursday here and you want me on the main bar. On Friday you want me here. Like I just kind of ran the table and I because I had to, like I was in survival
yeah.
mode. So that yeah, that period of my life is yeah, it was fun. It was made me who I am for sure.
I kind of tie that like I was gonna I want to touch on this in a second. Like, so I kind of want to plan it like the identity of leaving the NCAA and like leaving like as a college athlete and sharing that and that kind of like almost that vibe attract your tribe mindset. Like you
Mhm.
sharing that like that vulnerability. Do you think that maybe ties into the ability for people to connect with you, like athletes and stuff?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, I was always an athlete. It was the like one thing that when I transferred schools and when I moved, it was the one thing that I had immediately like a tribe because I could, participate on the team. My number, it's funny, my jersey number was always number 13 because when we moved, like it was always the number that was available. Like nobody ever wanted to be number 13. And so I always had built-in friends on the teams, and I love having athletes on our team as agents because to me athletes are, and I have this in common with them, we're coachable, we bounce back fast, we're resilient. Like if I'm not doing something right, like I want you to tell me and then I'll make an adjustment and I'll get back right in and do it again. It's like a coach, in track, for example. If I ran hurdles and if like I wasn't, hitting my spot, like the coach saying like, all right, do it again. Like that wasn't right. Do it again. It's being coachable is like one of my favorite qualities in someone.
I know when you say this, and when most people say this, they don't necessarily mean like you have to like completely open the book and tell all your deepest, darkest stories. That's not what vulnerability is. Um, but like, why do you think it's hard for like us to be vulnerable in times where it makes sense and it is actually beneficial for us?
This is such a good question, Andrew. I think that vulnerability is something that we in 2023, 2024, I think we're really learning how to be vulnerable in a way that is powerful because there's three different ways to be vulnerable. There's the woe is me, like angling inauthentic vulnerability, which is annoying. People sniff that out. That's freaking annoying. There's the vulnerability that's like one, like dipping your toe in and then not telling the full story, which can be kind of confusing. And then there's the full send vulnerability, which is very risky if what you're sharing doesn't land, because being vulnerable is you're sharing something important to you, right? Like whether it's a deep dark secret or whatever, it's important to you, which is why you've hung on to it. And letting people in on that and not having it land is, I think, one of the bravest things that you can do. There was just recently was National Coming Out Day, and I thought of this. While on social media, while people were telling their coming out stories, I couldn't help but think how I think the bravest people are the people who at 16, 17, 20s, 30s, no matter when, have the ability to say, hey, family, friends, I'm gay. Like the ability to say that is like the most brave, courageous thing. I can't even imagine having to wrestle with the fact that you need to say that out loud and then saying it out loud and being comfortable with it. And so many people have families that are accepting, but society in general, like it's just hard, right? And I think about that all the time when I'm being vulnerable. Like, what am I holding on to that's risky, and what's the risk of everybody knowing? And I think people really, really struggle with finding the way to be that third category.
Yeah. Does that tie into like, was that kind of an aha moment when you look at like the vision for like your team culture and like the way you want to lead and the way like you want to show up as like a parent, as a leader? Like where do you think that came from?
That's a good question. I think that I love efficiency and I love highly productive people. And I think the way to the world is being authentic, being transparent, and with that comes vulnerability. So it's actually always come fairly natural to me,
Uh-huh.
where because sometimes being vulnerable will be the most productive way to getting what needs to be done.
Yep.
Um, and I think also being one of four kids, being able to say things out loud, and having the three of my siblings were thick as thieves, were super close, as I'm sure you can imagine with what my parents went through. Having the three of them like always like having my back also has given me like I have like a confidence that I think comes from knowing, at least like if I say something weird, like my siblings at school will be there like defending me, because we're all that we have. But I think vulnerability can. So for me, I think it's in my bones. But I think that it can be learned, and I think Brene Brown actually, her book Dare to Lead, no, Daring Greatly.
Darren Greatly,
Um,
I think, yeah.
yeah. Oh my God, her shtick on vulnerability, and I'm saying shtick almost like condescendingly, and I don't mean to be. Her thing on vulnerability is fire, like 10 for 10.
Yeah. And thinking of it like it's almost like storytelling in a way, and knowing how to bridge the gap, because it's like when you're being vulnerable and you're trying to be in that moment, like, for example, like now I think of it as like, okay, if I'm going to share this, I better tie it back to why it's important to them. Like I better make that bridge at some point, or else I'm just kind of sharing it to share it. And
Yeah.
I think that
That's what I was saying, is that second type of vulnerability is when you're sharing something. You just hit on the head, where you're not bridging why you're not framing it. You're not, first of all, you're not framing it right. And usually it's because you're dipping the toe in and you aren't sure, like, and so you just come out and say it. And then it's like the so what factor kind of and that's where I think people really run into the biggest danger zone, because then it doesn't land, with the right intention. Like just coming out and saying like I don't feel well or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like it's not enough. Like you gotta get people from A to B there.
So I want to go into something that I think I saw somewhere. First, you moved. Did you move from San Diego to Palm Beach at, or
No,
no?
no. I lived all over the United States. I was working in healthcare, selling healthcare software. And my husband played baseball for 14 years before he retired and now works in baseball.
Yeah,
So we moved to Jupiter when he was with the Marlins in 2013, and I got
2013.
pregnant. Yeah, I got pregnant with my first son, and ended up leaving healthcare, starting my real estate company, and I've been here ever since.
Okay. And I think I saw somewhere like you get nearly like 50 million, maybe 50% of your business from just Google, like Google My Business,
Yeah.
reviews, search, and it kind of I went down a rabbit hole. Looks like you get close to like between Uber suggests and similar web. This is kind of wonky, so it's not completely perfect, but like 15,000 to 22,000 visits per month organically.
Where are you seeing that?
Uh, Uber suggests and similar web.
Oh, got it. Yeah,
Um,
it's
so
crazy.
yeah, I was like,
I mean, for a website that I built, like I literally built that website myself, and
and
I
that's what
maintain it myself.
that's what I was going to ask you. Like, why did you do that? Like, most people wouldn't be like, yeah, let me just build a website that gets like search. Like, they stick with like, especially in real estate, it's like Sphere or whatever. Like, you decided to like go all in on your website, and I was,
Yeah.
where did,
Yeah. So okay, two things. So I tried out a couple different software platforms right when I first started, and they're all the ones that like are the pay per click like lead generation type websites.
yep,
We had a Commissions Inc. website, and the biggest issue that I had with those, and there's nothing wrong with them, but for me, the biggest issue I had was I wasn't nimble enough on them. Like yes, I could freestyle some edits, but I couldn't mess with the back end. I couldn't do the metadata. I couldn't make it do what I needed it to do. And by the way, I am also very techie, like very, very, very techie. And I feel like before I launch into this, I need to say that as a disclaimer. Like I was coding of like VCRs when I was 5. So, but the point in this is that if you feel like something is holding you back, and because you can't be nimble with it, being nimble is one of the most secret sauces to building a business. Being fast and not having the thing be a bottleneck. Like being able to move quickly. And if there's a piece of software that's holding you back, find a new solution. For example, our CRM, so I use Copper for our CRM, like for my main client database, but for my own personal, like my personal CRM with my personal contacts, I still use a spreadsheet. Copper will slow me down. If I have to log into the CRM, like I literally, my chief of staff manages it for me, because if I have to log in, I'm going to lose the thing that I need to log. And so I have a spreadsheet with all the categories, and guess what? It freaking works. Like it works. Leaning into the thing that is the bottleneck. For me, the website was a major bottleneck. I needed to be able to post things quickly, massage things. And you know what? Listen, our website is not perfect. Now that I've been talking about it more, also it's giving me kind of anxiety that like I'm like, where did you see that? What was that on? Get off my website. Don't look at it, because it's embarrassing. Like I'm like, it's not embarrassing. It's like when I'm quote unquote bragging, which I'm not.
yeah.
That I built this website myself. I feel like haters are going to be like, oh, well, it's not perfect, right? But it gets the job done, and we get so many eyeballs on it because of Google Business Profile.
So that's the big reason, because I saw like Google Business Profile reviews, but then I'm also like looking at some of the like high traffic, like your best happy hours, like some of the best coffee, just some of
Yeah,
like the lifestyle stuff seems to get a lot of traffic as well for you.
yeah, yeah. That's
What's
content's money,
what's the
and it's all about
strategy?
consistency. Okay, so you and I would love your opinion about this actually. Okay, so that content is all repurposed I call it beat and repeat blogs. So blogs that we like refresh every quarter. We freestyle some new stuff in, refresh it, and get it back up. I don't do things on the website, and I know I should be, but I don't use automation to do those things, like to write those blogs. I still have humans in the background. I employ more full-time employees than I should to maintain this thing. And I could be leveraging automation, but I don't, because I feel like the second I start leveraging automation, I'm going to lose the nimbleness of, or the thing that has made it special. What's your opinion about that?
So when you say automation and when you say losing the nimbleness, what do you mean specifically?
So when I say automation, I mean like chat
Yeah,
GPT, like having
AI.
it, using AI to write content and to pump out content.
So first, do you know that if you take, like, if you took 10 transcripts of you talking, you could literally have AI say, write a voice guide of Holly Meyer Lucas of what do I say? What are like the adverbs? Like, tell me like what is my tone, my voice, my style, my personality, and it could build you this voice guide. Did you know
Yeah.
that?
So that type of stuff, I mainline AI for that type of stuff. I mean specifically like on like what I'm talking about is on our website, and like the content that we feed it to drive, like what's resulting in those 20,000 is what is resulting in that are humans in the background updating
Yep.
blogs and linking, and because I can't find automation that will do that in the way that that I like, and I'm probably wrong with that, but that's kind of what I mean.
So you're looking for automation when it comes to like the link, not the writing, but the linking and updating.
Yeah, yeah, all of it. And I don't think it exists. I think it's like, I guess what I'm asking you is like from an efficiency standpoint, like I'm kind of answering my own question, but that like that's still an area that we still freestyle it as humans. And I think it's important also for people to understand that like um that there are things that AI can take care of. Like you said, like having it tell you who you are is like personal brand juice. Like having it, I mean, there's so many things that it can do to help you do the freestyling on your website that you like, or the creating the content, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm pretty transparent about that.
I think I see it more as like a 10-80-10 thing, which like Dan Martell talks about in his book, like Buy Back Your Time. Like the first 10%, like you give it like, here's this like mega prompt, here's the voice, here's the information, the context structure, and then it does 80% of the work, and then the human comes in the last 10%, and that's
Yeah.
where like the whole programmatic SEO of like why Neil Patel and all these people are like pumping out hundreds of blogs. Like, I don't know if you saw, but something that I saw as a trend come around December, once ChatGPT launched, Redfin went from like posting a few blogs locally to
Yeah.
like they were pumping out 100+ blogs like a
Mhm.
month, just
Yeah.
local content.
Yep. I think that content is so I think video is going to continue to be prioritized by algorithms because you can't fake, I mean you can have artificially, you know, whatever. But I think video like this is where is what's going to be prioritized because it's the algorithm or SEO and Google in general is going to struggle to, I think it's going to become untrendy to have all this bullshit content, which is essentially what that is. It's, I call it SEO juice. You know, like the happy hours and those blogs are cool and people, you know, there's value there. But we don't do the blogs that are like talking about the best paint color 5 different ways, you know.
Yeah.
And I think because it's cheesy, and I think soon, I think we're going to see Google take into consideration that type of content is cheesy too. Like if you're like, I think it's like, hey, AI, tell me on this website how many different ways this person is saying your vibe attracts your tribe. And if it's 3,000 ways, like we're going to consider that one way. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's kind of being talked about right now as like it's like a Where's Waldo effect
Yeah.
when everyone looks the same, like you look for the thing that stands out, and that tends to be the one with like the human touch and like the personal stories. So
Yeah.
when you think about this and you think about like your next year, and like I look back at like you kind of being put in a corner back in like 2008 with like your parents, you look at the real estate market now, a lot of realtors are kind of put in a corner. They're like, okay, we need to like really step up. Where are you where are you going all in on your business in the next like year or two? Like, where's your focus?
This is such an important question because I think right now so many agents are really struggling with what they should be doing and what the market's doing. And um, I am continuing to do what I have always done, which is double down on what works when it works, double down when it works. Like that is literally my, like, I march to the beat of doubling down when it works. So for us, what works is social media stuff, our website, mailers. We're continuing to do that, and we're bailing hard on what doesn't work. And it sounds so maybe cliche, but I think it's so I've had I've had 3 kids and 5 pregnancies, and each time I've been pregnant, I gain a shit ton of weight, right? And each time I lose the weight, my friends and people are like, "Oh, you look so good! Like, how did you lose that weight, right? Like, what did you do? How'd you lose it?" And it's like, it's so basic for me. I do what works and I stop doing what doesn't work. So I eat less and I exercise more. Next question, please. Like it's that. And so I think that now that we're heading into, potential recession, whatever, I would bail hard on, and I would cut costs where you can, but don't cut costs on the things that work.
Yeah, and fitness is probably like the best parallel. It's kind of when you look at health, it's very simple, and that doesn't mean it's easy. It's simple in the fact that like you eat well, you move, you'll stay fit, and you do that over a long enough period, the numbers will play out. And it kind of correlates a lot to stuff in sales, marketing. Like if you stay consistent on social media, like and you do the right things, you make the adjustments, you keep growing, get better. You talk about being like all over the place, being scatterbrained and like chaos. How do you rein yourself into being like, okay, let me be intentional with social media? What kind of structure do you put around that? And then when you think about scaling yourself authentically, like what does that start to look like in your team? So like you don't lose kind of like your brand and your voice.
Yeah. Okay. So I will say that now that we've had this progression and we've established that that I am chaotic seeming, and that my brand is authentic, right? Those things go hand in hand intentionally to align with the ideal client avatar that I'm trying to attract, and the my vibe that is trying to attract my tribe, which are people that when they see the proverbial chaos, and this makes it seem like I'm like harebrained, and I am not by any stretch of the imagination, but it mitigates, it puts out there that this is who I am, and I am not ashamed of it. I am highly successful. And it's funny, there was this thing that Gary Vaynerchuk said that like I'll never forget. Like he was talking about something, and someone brought up how his like desk is like just kind of chaos, right? And he was like, yes, and like, what is there a question? Is there a follow up? Like, yes, and because he's very transparent about it, and that's kind of been my philosophy with all of my weaknesses. I'm very, very transparent about what my weaknesses are, and if you want to consider being chaotic a weakness, then you're probably not going to be my people. Like, you're not going to be an ideal client for me. You're not going to be an ideal agent for me. Here's why. Chaotic, for people that get it, and that are where that's relatable, means resourceful and good on the fly, and the person that you want in your corner when you need something creatively executed. And Gary Vee is the perfect example of this, because like there are a lot of things that he is and there are a lot of things that he's not, and his personal brand is so right and tight on what, like, he gets shit done, and how he gets from A to B remains to be seen, but it gets done. And so I've leaned into that intentionally, and it's part of my personal brand is bringing to the table, what you see is what you're going to get. so that if someone does hire us and they don't get what they thought they were signing up for, um, I can never, no one has ever fired us because I pretended to be something I'm not.
Yeah, and I've seen like Alex Hormozy talk about this. Like for example, people say, "Oh, they're la- they're lazy," but if you kind of take it a couple steps further, if you're a lazy entrepreneur and you still do the work, you will
Yeah.
end up finding the shortcuts, and actually being lazy is a good thing and not a bad thing.
Yeah. I go through periods of, and I think that this is true for any creator or entrepreneur. True. So I have ADHD. I'm dyslexic, and I wasn't a great student, but I have been told by a lot of people that I am very smart. Okay, but on paper I'm not. Like you wouldn't like if my German high school teachers would see me now. Like it is like if you would have thought like the kid in the class that could barely read, turns out I have dyslexia. It's something that's really, really common among high achieving people. And I think it's because I think the reason why high achieving people who have that hybrid of ADHD, dyslexia, and scatterbrain, we create pathways and we see there's a lot of pattern recognition, and a lot of like connecting the dots, like if this, then that, because we've had to for the way that our
Yep.
brain processes things.
Yeah, I ADHD. I kind of signal like one of my strengths as like being able to be in tune to patterns really quickly. Um,
Yes.
so I was curious, how much like with everything do you put weight into like not just figuring out how to do something, like how to do social media, how to do like the website versus like thinking about who? Because you mentioned having like a big team and having staff. Like, how impactful and is finding the right who to be that like structure to your chaos?
Yeah, it's everything. So it's the reason why I started the cheat code. So the cheat code is the cheat code to leadership, in my opinion. If you are an ADHD entrepreneur, and you don't have to have ADHD, but if you're an entrepreneur that lives in this world of knowing what the goal is and needing to get there, but moving on to the next goal by the time like you figure out how to get there, there is the cheat code, which is hiring a chief of staff or an implementer, um, that you can delegate the task to and have them run with it and implement it and get it done. Delegating to me is the number one thing that separates leaders from real bosses. And when I say bosses, I mean like bosses, like badass bosses, not
Richard
like,
Branson.
yeah, yes, yeah. He talks about this all the time, actually. Um, yeah, this is his thing, being able to delegate. The second I stepped into my power as a leader was the second I understood that never mind, I'll just do it is not a thing if you want to get to the next level. And for me, it started with being when I hired my chief of staff. I was in the weeds constantly with my agents, like reporting to me directly, and me like wanting to constantly help them, but not being able to move the needle forward because I was in the weeds with all of their shenanigans. And once I hired her as this buffer in between everybody in the organization and me, which is what the chief of staff is, everything funnels through her to me. No, I don't even hire people anymore. I literally don't even interview people. Don't interview them. Like they show up and it's like, oh, hi, nice to meet you, because she takes that out of like off of my plate, and it has been an absolute game changer.
it, Something that I feel like I see very common, especially in like sales industries like real estate, is like you have this high performer, and at some point they realize they need to become a leader, and there's kind of like this gap. And a lot of the times, the reason people get into sales is not necessarily because they want to be in real estate. It's like they're usually backed in a corner financially. um,
Yeah.
and it's kind of like an option on the table, and they're like, well, it's kind of the best option, let me go with this. And
Yep.
it's like, I will make this happen mentality. But when you want to become a leader, that kind of has to switch. And what I'm kind of, there's a theory, I have a theory that a lot of the reason that people become in people become good in real estate and get into real estate is what holds them back from being a leader, because you are making all this money and then you start to get like tied up to how much you make, or like you don't want to give it away because you're afraid of reverting back to that point. So you
Yeah.
don't hire as quickly as you may need to. What's your
Yeah,
thought on that?
100%. No, I could not agree with you more. I think so in real estate, there is the hell vortex that agents get into once they start having, after their like fifth deal, they realize that they need an assistant. And so they hire a transaction manager or a director of operations if they're fancy. And that person is usually not qualified to be able to run that person's organization, because by your fifth deal, if you're doing things right, like the perception that it's so hard to get into real estate, that edge never goes away. And so you're scared to overpay and over leverage yourself, so you hire someone that's when I say not qualified necessarily, it's also because of what you're willing to spend. And you think that because you're a jack of all trades, you can train the person to do all the things. And usually that person is also a real estate agent who can't get it together and who knows how to log into the MLS. They have their own MLS login. They know how to write contracts. So that person seems like a good fit. And ultimately, if you take all of that, and you say, okay, so there's this business that has been in business for a little bit of time and they need help. And so they hire this person. Like if you copy and paste that and remove the real estate terminology and make it a business, that is not the way to scale, like at all.
Yep.
Like, no. So part of what I'm trying to do with real estating, which is, bridging the gap, is really helping agents unpeel this self-doubt that if they hire someone that's qualified to be their right hand or their assistant or the first hire that they need to make, that they're not going to lose money if they continue doing what has worked for them and have that person fall into place with them and like work on it with them. Like what ends up happening with the transaction manager workflow is it ends up going like this, where it's like spinning in different directions, and then the frustration that mounts. I mean, I feel like when I run into an agent who has had this assistant for like 6 months, 9 times out of 10, they live in a hell of never mind, I'll just do it with that person, because they don't want to fire them because they feel bad. They don't know how to make the adjustment because they don't have the time. And by the way, the inspection is up tonight, so I need you to write this inspection addendum, and it's never mind, I'll just do it. And that is the worst place to be, the absolute worst place to be. And I was there, by the way, I was there myself. Like that's how my first 3 years went. And I was absolutely drowning. I hired a coach, desperately needing help. And every time I would explain my situation, they just didn't get it, because they were trying to force, and most of the mentors that I talked to about like what I needed help with, they were trying to force me into this millionaire real estate agent model,
Yep.
which is the model where there's the rainmaker and the team members, and they're mostly buyer's agents. And then you have a transaction manager in between. And that model just isn't, in my opinion, for how we need to leverage social media and marketing and leverage our personal brands as a team leader. That model does not work. It doesn't work. And for a number of reasons, but I don't know, I could talk about that for ever.
We can touch on that in a second. I also want to touch on at some point, like the thought process that went into all this horizontal, like thinking of businesses. But what do you think, what was like a huge mistake early on hiring that you wish you knew sooner, that if you changed this, like it would have completely revolutionized, like hiring the right people, them getting onboarded, getting trained, like, and really doing well off the gates? Like, what do you wish you learned sooner?
Okay, so this is like my favorite question, because the short answer is I don't wish I had done anything different, because I needed to make these 3 major mistakes to be able to get to a place where I am now. So I made 3 major mistakes in terms of hiring and leadership. The first was, as I just kind of described, it was hiring someone, a handful of people, for roles that I hadn't clearly defined in my organization. I basically hired fast and then fired slow. So I brought people in and where I liked them as a personality or a team culture fit. And then I just figured out a role for them once I realized that their personal and professional capabilities weren't aligned with the task that I needed from them. So basically, I would hire these people, and there were three of them specifically that I just would create a role for because I, after hiring them, realized that like either what I needed them to do, the task had changed, or like I hadn't flushed it out fully. So TLDR there is have clearly defined roles in writing and hire the role, not the person or not the personality.
So
This,
before you get into the second, I
yeah.
want to dive into that a little bit. How do you specifically flesh out like what that role should look like?
Okay. So in full disclosure, I'm not good at it. Like in
Okay.
my head, what I think, and this is where the hiring a chief of staff or outsourcing this, or if you don't have the budget to hire a chief of staff, outsourcing what your problems are. And I think you could actually leverage AI for this. Like, hey, actually, I guarantee you could. If you gave the AI what your business problems are, and then like act as a mentor, as a coach. These are my business problems. What roles do you think I need to hire? And then give me that job description. That would actually probably flush it out. I'm going to try that actually. But my personality type is not good at it because like in my head, I'm like, I need help. For example, I need help with our marketing stuff. Okay, I need a marketing person. And it's like, no, I'm actually like, I'm the chief marketing officer. I don't need help with the marketing stuff because I'm going to do it. I need help with the contract stuff because that's what's slowing me down. So I need to eject out of the contract stuff so I can do the marketing stuff. Right. And like defining that is challenging for so many people. Really unpacking, and this is part of the consulting that I do and the workshops that I'm doing, unpacking what your bottlenecks actually are and then hiring those things is how you should be, how you should mitigate that problem. And instead, what I was doing is I was hiring people that I liked, that I wanted on the team.
What are some ways that people can like identify those bottlenecks in their business?
When you have that mounting, like when you have like a mounting stress ball like on your chest, and you're like harebrained and the real kind of harebrained where it's like, oh shit, whatever it is that's stressing you out the most, unpacking whether or not you're the only person that can do it. So I'll give you an example. So this podcast, right? Like
Hmm.
you and I are the only people that can be sitting here doing this, right?
Yep.
And let's say that there was anxiety ahead of this, which there wasn't, but let's say there was. What that anxiety is around, and if someone else can do that task, and it sounds so cliche and so simple, but people don't think clearly when it's their own mess and their own like fire. Like they think like the stress might be that I have to jump on this podcast with Andrew, instead of the fact that what's stressing you out is that this call that I had ahead of the thing with Andrew, which is a call about a charity event that I'm sponsoring, I don't need to be on that call, right? Um, and it's really hard, I think, to do it by yourself and process it by yourself, because I think one huge piece of advice that I have is be very cognizant of your blind spots, and that everybody has blind spots. So like uncovering what Chris Voss calls these black swans to some extent. Have you read Never Split the Difference?
Yeah, I have.
It's the best. Yeah. So
Great book.
uncovering like, it's the best. So uncovering what your personal black swans are, and like me being stressed about the Andrew podcast. This is actually a really good example. And full disclosure, I'm making this up, obviously. But me being stressed about the Andrew is like, well, what's the black swan there? Well, it's because I had the charity call right ahead of it, and I wasn't ready for it because I don't care about it. Not that I don't care about charity. Edit this kindly, Andrew, but does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah,
And the other
it
thing
makes
is too,
sense.
so taking it one step further, and I'm diving a little bit into this in case this gives someone some inspiration. But one of the things that I identified was what would be like my stress mount was my household things. So for example, if I'm on this charity call and I know that I need to move the laundry from, for my kids' stuff, and I need to pick my kids up, and like sometimes that creates the stress ball. So outsourcing that alone, like so many real estate agents, when they first start, they think that they need a transaction manager when the contract part is actually not what they're stressed about or what's their bottleneck. What is their bottleneck is the fact that they're a single mom that has to go get their kids. So maybe outsource that, like not your parenting of your kids, but getting from having that hard stop at 5 o'clock, having someone that can do that for you so you can be flexible at the end of the day to get your contracts done. Maybe that's what you should be doing.
That kind of dives into like almost this like taboo like subject of like outsourcing your parenting, where it's
Yeah.
like where it's very easy to feel guilt how did you kind of be okay with saying, I don't need to be doing this, this, and this with the household, and being okay with like outsourcing certain pieces of it?
I love this question so much because you're absolutely right, especially for women. It is taboo to talk about outsourcing household things, and I hate that so much. But the female dynamic aside from that, I have always, my entire life, I have been a workhorse. It gives me satisfaction. It gives me purpose. It gives me all the things. My energy is at its peak when I feel good about myself, and working, whether it be toward a track record, a soccer team, or my businesses, makes me feel good. So I'm the best possible mom that I can be when I am fulfilled. Okay. I tried to be a stay-at-home mom for about 30 seconds and just, I can't do it. And my kids, by the way, like my sons, I have three boys, and we are thick as thieves. I am so close with them because I take the time to be. What I don't take the time to do is their laundry, their meals, and their transport. I am at every single game. I pick them up usually from practice, so afterward, and I prioritize time intentionally with them. I share this a lot with real estate agents specifically in the mornings. So we get up early and we have family breakfast together, instead of having family dinner and so going back to what we were talking about the stress ball, right? The stress ball for a lot of moms is the family dinner and this perception that we have to have this family dinner to be considered like a family unit. And I'm not taking anything away from the families that do that. I love that. That's beautiful for you. But for me, dinner time as a real estate agent between the hours of 5 and 8 p.m., your phone is usually blowing up and you're leaving opportunity on the table. And you're also leaving like your client's livelihood on the table. If they work from 9 to 5 and then they're doing their real estate stuff and they need questions answered from 5 to 8, right?
Yep.
So dinner can be really challenging, and you put pressure, I think, undue pressure on yourself if you also then try to be a parent during those times. So changing the script on that and not prioritizing dinner. Dinner is a meal, right? Not prioritizing dinner and instead prioritizing breakfast time in the morning. I take my kids to school every day, and our mornings are sacred. Nobody is blowing up my phone at 6 a.m., 7 a.m., 8 a.m., right? And so those hours that I get with my kids are to jumpstart the day. And in my opinion, I think it's better that way. Like, honestly, as a family unit, I'm sure all the domestic queens will come for me for saying that because family dinners are important, and maybe I'm just being vulnerable with this, but I outsource everything. And I did it progressively. It's important that I say this. I did it progressively as I made more money. Like I was not, and don't do this, guns a-blazing, if you're just starting out and you don't have the budget to outsource everything immediately. Like you got to make some money first before you can start doing that.
Yeah, and that kind of ties into like quality over quantity time.
Yeah.
And having that quality time. How much, because this kind of ties together when you think of your personal life, your business life, well, when you're moving at 100 miles per hour and you don't take, especially we can look at the real estate market the past like 2 to 3 years, you don't take the time to kind of step back, reflect, and see, what do I actually need to work on in my business to move like way further? Do you take time to do that reflection, or like is there any type of like structure around like that type of business planning or business, I guess, thinking for you?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I always double down on, and I have my team double down on rentals when things get slow. Rentals are always a way to make a buck and to have relationships. When things heat up, rentals are really challenging. They become a pain in the ass for everybody. So that's like my way of recognizing that we need to be working on the business, because rentals immediately will inject relationships and have like start real estate and start real estate conversations and start relationship conversations. And then the kind of deeper answer to that is one of the only things I did right day one was tracking my numbers and tracking my P&L heavily. So I am always aware of what I have coming in and where my business is. I use a spreadsheet system that I've used forever. And so I can always tell what kind of month we're having a few months ahead of time because I have trend data. And when things start to get slow and I intuitively feel like, for example, right now, like the market's shifting a little bit. Same thing happened 2 years ago with the Ukraine situation. There was a January where it was like, we're going to double down on training because we can breathe for a second. I always prioritize working on the business when things are slow, and I always treat it as an opportunity. Like right now, a lot of agents have a lot of time on their hands. Use that time. Use it. It's a blessing. It's a total freaking blessing.
Yeah,
And
I
it's hard to
agree.
say that to someone that's like trying to make their car payment, of course. Like it's not lost on me that that sucks a lot financially. But
Yeah, I think it kind of ties into like blocking out like, okay, let me spend time like getting business and let me spend time like working in the business, so like having those different blocks where you're like it's okay to be like look at finances, like it's okay for me to like review like this or
yeah,
to build out this next project, for example.
yeah.
So I know I kind of derailed you a little bit. Like your first point with like was hiring lessons were like hiring the wrong people in the wrong
Oh,
seats,
I was like,
hiring fast,
what are we circling back to? Yeah,
and having
yeah.
like undefined roles. So like
Mhm.
actually flushing that out like before you hire was like a big change for you.
Mhm. Yeah. So the second one, the second mistake that of the three early mistakes that I made, the second mistake was getting too close and too personal with my employees and my agents, and and putting a lot of personal stock into their development and into their loyalty.
Mm.
I think a lot of passionate Enneagram 7 ADHD entrepreneurs like myself. I think a lot of us do this where we uh, ultimately what ends up happening, and I'm going to work backwards from this, but what ends up happening is we get blindsided when then that employee slash agent slash what we thought was a friend ends up doing something that benefits them and their family and their career, like leaving your team for an opportunity that they had been working on for a while. Like you feel so supremely blindsided when that happens, and it happens to everybody if you have this like Enneagram 7 type personality like I do, and I'm really transparent, and I talk a lot about this because I think it's comforting for others who have this personality trait to like be trusting and like pour our energy and our passion into other people, and then have that person screw us. Um, and I'm putting air quotes around screw us because now with maturity, like I see how people are just doing the best that they can. Um, I will say that how you exit an organization is so important to your personal brand, and not burning bridges with someone that's helped you is pretty important. That's a whole separate issue. The mistake that I made was taking that stuff so personally, and it starts with entering that relationship, that professional working relationship, from like your heart versus your head. And that's what I did from day one with all of my agents. Like I poured my heart and soul into their development, and expecting that a loyalty would exist, and it did for a number of years. um, but then when those agents had or the employees, like I had one employee, for example, that had been working on, like she had a job offer for like 6 weeks that she was working on, and then she ended up leaving my team, and she was doing all that in the background, and I felt like it was so shady at the time. And looking back on it, I think we got into that place because I had invested so much, and now it's like because I don't do the hiring anymore too. I've removed myself from that. I don't. The opportunity doesn't exist for me to get personal. And now if an agent leaves, it's like hugs and hand pounds, love that for you, but on to the next one. And I do hate that because I think that having like a working environment that's like a family is so cool, and it's so important to have that. I think it's cool to have that type of team culture, and if I could sustain that, I would. But it's also really easy to get hurt and blindsided when people feel like you're more invested in the relationship than they are.
Yeah, it's kind of like, and tell me if I'm wrong with this, the high D personality, like a big driver type, they tend to over, I shouldn't say overvalue, but they value very highly loyalty. And
Mhm.
when they feel that loyalty is like burned, that's where it kind of comes across, and it can come across negative. And I think it shows a sign of maturity from a high D personality when you're able to say, hey, this is a family, but it's also kind of like a sports team where it's like it's okay when people get traded on and off. It's okay when
Yeah.
like we level up, you might not be at the level, or like it's okay also as a leader to say, okay, maybe they just leveled up into a different opportunity.
Yeah.
What do you think helped you kind of be okay with that? Was it moving yourself out of the role, or was it something
Yeah.
else?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is was moving removing myself from it because I naturally am like that, and that's I think one of my best qualities. And so I don't ever want to lose that about myself. So creating but I don't want to also make that part of my personality my business's problem. So creating that buffer in between by having a chief of staff who is like the buffer, and that has been a game changer. But I haven't really changed that about myself. I've more just created boundaries and created buffers.
Nice. And is the last like third mistake, should we talk about that, or should we go into like your horizontal like business? What do you think?
So yeah, I mean, the third mistake is kind of my favorite because it's the most obvious seeming. And it's so cliche to say this, but the third mistake is not taking feedback that people give you at surface level, um, and also taking feedback that people give you hard. So it's like it's two things there. It's having a strong enough ego to absorb feedback, and and when I say feedback, I mean as formal as like, hey, I have some feedback for you, or as informal as like reading the room. And if you're a this like Enneagram 7 high D, that personality type pattern recognition, like you'll see feedback happening in front of you, like as it's happening, right? So two things: taking the feedback and unpacking it, and making adjustments if necessary, removing your ego from it and making adjustments if necessary, and also discarding and throwing away the feedback that is forced upon you as a leader that is actually garbage feedback. Like really, really taking the time to weed through it, and make the adjustments where necessary, and realize that sometimes negative feedback is in the interest of the person giving it to you. I would sit and stew for hours over something that one of my agents, said to me. That like I had an agent once. This was years ago. That we had there was some friction because I needed her to do something that she wasn't doing, and she responded to me by saying a number of things, but there was something very specific that it lived in my head rent free for so long. She said, you sit in your office and none of us really know what you're doing in there all day. And so I took that as like, how the hell do you not know what I'm like? I'm building the website. I'm making the phone ring. I'm following up on leads. I'm doing your jobs, right? But she was right in that the perception that the team had was that I was just like, because I was gatekeeping what I did all day. Like, because I didn't want them to necessarily know that I was fucking around with the website, because I thought that they wouldn't understand like that part is actually really, really important. I also didn't want to like reveal my secret. So I didn't want them to know like what I was using for, by the way, Canva for the graphics. I wanted them to like maybe think that I was using Adobe, like photo, like whatever the Adobe thing is that's like elite, but I was just using Canva. So on one hand, she was right in giving me that feedback because it made me make an adjustment. But on the other hand, I don't need to justify myself to anybody. Like there's two things happening there, right?
Yeah.
And so I think as a leader, just hire first and foremost, hiring right, being smart about it, making adjustments when needed, absorbing feedback, and all of that centers around just having a really safe ego, like a safe and in check ego.
Yeah. Do you think that comes from surrounding yourself with other great people, like other leaders, being in different groups like masterminds, or like having different perspectives, or do you think that's just like a maturity, like you overcome it?
I think that it's a product of 2023 mentorship, which I'm putting air quotes around because it's like I consider Chris Voss to be a mentor of mine. I've never met him, but and Tim Ferriss and Adam Grant and all these brilliant people whose podcasts and whose books I mainline. Um, I consider, I think, sorry, to answer your question,
Oh, you're good.
I think it's that. I think it's absorbing content. Um, like I don't think that's a maturity thing or an experience thing. I think it's hearing other people share their struggles and how they adjusted and me going, "Oh, me too."
When it comes to like learning leadership and trying to get from like that high performer to that high performing leader, how did you what were the things that you put in place to learn how to do that?
Um, so I think unpacking anytime. So let me restart that. Unpacking anytime anything has gone sideways is something that's always been one of my strengths. So whether we lose a deal or, we have some kind of conflict internally on the team or, a conflict with a client or any kind of friction, I intentionally do a postmortem and unpack whatever is happening and I figure out how we could have done things differently. Or sometimes what's also powerful is identifying that you couldn't have done anything differently, that it just is what it is. Um, and getting better from it. Like always, always, always getting better from it. I think that has the natural progression into leadership comes as a result of taking ownership of those things too, which is something that I've always done. I think it goes back to what I was talking about being an athlete. Like, if I miss the mark on something, I think that's a learned behavior from being an athlete, like just having to bounce back quickly and unpack why the mark was missed, for example, and just being better next time.
Yeah, and that kind of goes to a quote that you say, it's like failure is the key to success. A post-mortem analysis of what went wrong is everything.
Yeah, it is. Yep. Did I say that? Damn.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
So, question on your businesses. Like, I'm sure if you created, because there's a lot of different businesses you could have went into. You could have started a title company, you could have gone to mortgages, but you decided to go into like coaching for like agents and then leaders and kind of like almost like a placement, and then as well as the agency and the studio. Mm-hmm. What if you started that when you were making like a few $100,000? It probably wouldn't work. But like you doing those now, like you are at a different level. What goes through your mind on like, okay, this is something that it's time for me to solve? Well, I guess first it should be like first realizing like this is something that should be solved, which is what those kind of spin out of, and then knowing it's the right time to start something like that.
Yeah, I think that it's important to disclose that like real estate is an amazing business to get into when you don't have a lot of capital, when you can, like at the very beginning, freestyle, good old fashioned work ethic. And like I started my business with, $500 and made it work. And I've always bootstrapped everything that I do. I bootstrap. Yeah. But I will say that with Hype Boss in particular, which is the creative agency and PR firm, content creation studio, having a space was really, really important to me. So having I bought a 5,000 square foot warehouse, and I'm pouring, my heart and soul into making this place awesome. And I wouldn't have and didn't pull the trigger on launching that until I had the financial means to be able to do it right. Mm-hmm. I think the business savvy around that came as a result of running my real estate business for the last, 10 years. I've always had a freestanding office. I've always had employees and significant P&L to manage. And so I know what it takes to run a business. And listen, I will bootstrap the shit out of anything. But with marketing stuff, if we're selling the creative agency and the resources, I want them and need them to be best in class. So we're spending some money on that for sure.
And it's not like an unintentional move. It's a very smart move because it's stuff that you can leverage in your business. It's very connected. It's not like you're just going out and starting some franchise for some random thing.
Yeah.
And tell me about like, because PR is something that you've been doing for like a while. It's not like I've noticed like you have like a lot. You're on the news all the time. Like you get all these opportunities, like it's a very intentional part of your business. What is the secret to like how do you even get PR? That's what a lot of people like are curious of, like how do you even get PR?
Okay, so I love this question because it's always come so naturally to me, and it's the most no duh thing in the world. One of the reasons why I started High Boss is because I have realized that it's not no duh for everybody. So, getting PR to me and getting exposure for anything that you're, any project, event, yourself, whatever, is about finding the story, finding the interesting piece of that story, and pitching it to the people that control that audience that would find that story interesting. It is such a
Mm.
simple formula. And it's, I'll give you an example. So, one of my very first Hype Boss clients, I soft launched this 3 weeks ago. And one of my first test clients, so she's a dear friend of mine. Her name's Kelly Straka. She is a renowned celebrity designer. She owns like 20 Airbnb properties, and she's this hybrid of interior designer, like badass interior designer. Like she did Mike Trout's house. She's amazing. All these celebrities. She also owns 20 Airbnbs, and her story has like never been told because she works with these celebrities, and she doesn't, because she works on their homes. She's not sharing their homes on social media, right? She could
Yep.
like she has permission to, like she did Rob Dyrdek's house, and I think he gave her permission to like shoot a video, but she's just very humble. Okay. But she owns these 20 Airbnbs, and she's a total boss in that space. So I was talking to her about one of these Airbnbs that she has. It's a Taylor Swift branded Airbnb, specifically for Swifties, for their bachelorette parties and their mother-daughter trips. And I'm like, holy shit, like that's the
That's smart.
story. Yeah. It's, first of all, it's brilliant, right? Like it's brilliant. But the point of what I'm trying to make is that that is a story actually to pitch to the editor of Business Insider who writes about Airbnb. Like there's someone that writes about Airbnb specifically at Business Insider who would think that that's interesting. So like that's the angle of the story. It's not that she's a celebrity and working in then that she is a, celebrity designer, whatever. It like finding the thing that's relevant is something that I think people that have that pattern recognition can do very, very fairly easily. And it's not lost on me that most people don't have that. So my biggest advice with PR is if you don't have that ability to find the story, hire someone that does. I think PR, so creative stuff, marketing stuff, editing is you're buying your time back if you're creative, really. With PR, you're really buying exposure that is very kind of nichey. Like I wouldn't freestyle and do your own PR stuff if you're not good at finding the story and then finding the person that will write about it with some tenacity.
Yeah, so there's kind of two sides to that. You have one, the creative, the strategy, the idea, where's that angle in that story? And then the second side is like, how do you pitch it? So first talking, because I feel like that's kind of like your specialty and your ability to recognize patterns, culture. Like if you had to try to teach in a way, like how you think through finding and thinking through that story for someone that might not necessarily be like have these 20 Airbnbs with these like the great clients, kind of bring it to layman's terms in a way. How do you kind of think through finding that story?
I think it's getting, so first and foremost, it's getting to know whoever it is. So if you're doing it for yourself, okay. So getting to know who you are in your core, not what you want people to know about you, but like who you actually are in your core and what makes you interesting and valuable to society and like what that thing is. And then taking it and taking like 15 derivatives of that and boiling down like what has made you the person that you are, finding the interesting nugget there is, and it's hard to do it on yourself. That's why I was saying like hiring a
Yeah.
professional to do this for you. I sold a house for one of my dear friends who owns a real PR firm. And when I say real in comparison to High Boss, which is like a hybrid, her PR firm she gets people in the news. And, she sat with me. I sold her home for free in exchange for her doing some workshopping around my personal brand and some PR services. This was years ago.
Nice.
And I remember she sat with me for like she spent 10 minutes just really unpacking what makes my brand and myself special And she and I have this in common, this like pattern recognition, right? And ultimately, what it boiled down to for me was that she. And it's funny when it came out of her mouth, I was like, "Well, yeah, but we can't say that." And she was like, "No, but I can say that as the PR person." So she goes, "Well, you're just kind of in a league of your own." And it was like, well, yeah, like I'm a lot of things to a lot of people, and I do everything to like be, yeah, that, but it felt so self-aggrandizing for me to say it. So having a professional buffer as the one that's like, no, you should say that, like 100% you should say that, I'm gonna go pitch it. um I think a lot of people struggle with like figuring out who they are, and one test method for that is, and I say this all the time, but be the person you needed when you needed help the most. And a lot of
Hmm.
times people are already being that person. um, like that's kind of how I mentor, is I'm the person that I needed when I needed help the most. And so defining what that is will really help you find your niche and help you find what your story is.
Yeah, it's kind of I the cheat code to like content is thinking in terms of like the ideas in terms of time. Like you have your
uh,
past, your current, and like the future. And if you think about your past, everything that you had to do, overcome, like who you used to be, that's a form of content, stuff that you could talk about. Do you, the writing out 15 ideas and really having almost like all these different options, do you think that's a big part, is like just getting it out on paper of like, okay,
yeah.
here's this potential?
Yeah, 100%. And every time that I've done this, on myself, this is funny actually, and for other people, but for myself, I always identify something that's like actually really interesting that I've never really thought about before as like the thing that is like my mom. I own a design and renovation business that my mom runs, and why we started that. It came to me the other day. I was like, oh, that's actually a good story, and I live that every single day. I've had this company for 10 years, and I've never considered how much that story claps. And it took me explaining it back to a reporter a few weeks ago to be like, oh, that, like, actually, that's a huge piece of content. So I think that writing out how you got to where you are, and like the, just writing out 15 things that like you feel in your soul, you might not think it's interesting, but the person you're talking to from a PR perspective, I can guarantee you that if they're good at their job and they're a pattern story, they have this gene, um, that they will find the story, because everyone has a cool story. And
Yeah.
also, everyone has an audience. Like your audience might not be People Magazine, but there is an audience for, I think that that's important. That distinction is really important. And I'm pretty transparent about that, that like, I got a story a couple weeks ago into People Magazine that's actually like devastating. One of our colleagues in the sports entertainment world passed away pretty tragically. His name's Nick Cardilas. And the narrative around his death, he was dating or he was engaged to a reality TV star, and so that when he died, the headlines were dominated by this This person's name's fiance tragically passes away, and I couldn't stand it. Like I love Nick, and he was a professional hockey player. He was a badass real estate agent at the age of like he was in his 20s, and he was our sports and entertainment guy, or one of like three sports and entertainment agents in Nashville, which is a sports and entertainment hub. And he was doing it he was really really doing it in terms of his career. It's hard to make it in that city, and it's hard to make it in sports and entertainment. And he was a badass, and that story was not being told. And so we put together a
Mm.
video of all the homes that he had sold, and our relationship with him as the sports and entertainment agent. And we ended up securing a story for him in People Magazine. And when I say we, like I am pointing the credit. I'm not trying to take credit for. I literally just couldn't stand it. I started a task group. I was like, send me all your pictures of Nick. I can't take this shit anymore. He was not so and so's fiance. He was a badass real estate agent and a former professional hockey player. And I can't sit still with that being the headline. So I changed the narrative. And his family, the way that they reached out over how, like, it literally makes me want to cry. Like it changed their like brief morning. It briefly changed their morning because someone did, like, we did right by him by doing
Yeah.
that. And I don't know why I just went off on that tangent, but
No,
yeah, sorry.
it's awesome. It's one that speaks a lot in volumes about you wanting to tell the right story, rather than what they were trying to do was just trying to use the name of the other person to get
Yeah.
publicity when he should have been the one being the one known. So that's
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah. And I think that doing right by the story is, it's just, it's so important when it comes to PR and fight. So People Magazine was the right avenue for that. Um, and the way that it was placed, like when we put together the video, they actually ended up picking it up on their own. Like the video was, and the narrative was strong enough with how we wrote the caption.
That's awesome. And so just tying that all together, how do you like pitch? How do you get them to even like hear you out? How do you like reach out? Like, is there something there?
Yeah, so I mean, it's 2023, like almost 2024, right? It is easy. It's easy to find journalists online. It's easy to find their contact information, in my opinion. Like if you have enough tenacity to like find it, pitch the story to the person that controls the audience that you think would want to hear the story. So, I mean, this example is the most obvious. Like I reached out to a Business Insider. I reached out to a journalist friend there, and I was like, "Hey, who's your Airbnb writer?" Because I knew that they had one. Like they would have to have one because they've been covering it. And the reason I know they've been covering it is because I pay attention. You know, like pay attention, consume news, consume media, pay attention to who is writing what. And I think that if you're concise and you're I mean, it's like anything in business. Like I don't open emails if they're not interesting, right? So explain how it benefits them to write the story. And it really, I mean, I hate saying that it's simple because I don't know. I think it's simple if what I just explained will land with 1% of your audience, and the 1% will be like, yeah, that makes sense. Like that's how I do everything, because that's how, like if I have a buyer for a $10 million oceanfront property, a waterfront property, I'm going to go knock on some doors. Like that's what I do. You know?
Yeah.
Next question, please. Right? Like eat less, exercise more, right? Double down when it works, bail when it doesn't. Find the reporter, pitch in the story. Like
That's it's funny, like when you do the foundational things right, like you have the great story, you have the great hook, you have the interesting angle, then you just reverse engineer, like who do I send that to? You do the work of, okay, let me cold or warm email, DM them, try to reach out to them. Of course, when you have the right pitch, you put it in front of the right person, you do that work in the middle. It seems simple to you because it's like, yeah, duh. I just do it.
yeah. I think the hard part is identifying what the story is and positioning it in a way that is not what the story is, but how their audience would care about it. And I think that's why you really need, for PR stuff, you really do need a professional as the buffer in between it. Always, I mean, one of our things with Hype Boss is outsourcing your brag. So, and that's what, like if I will hire Hype Boss on my own behalf. Because I don't like, it's the same thing with like for sale by owner. Like don't sell your house by owner. Don't freestyle your own. If you're a high stakes person who is exposed and an entrepreneur and whose voice is important, don't outsource and freestyle that unless you're very, very, very dialed into it. And I think with PR, I mean, specifically, like you pitching a story about yourself is, you might have journalists that like, would get freaky with that, but you also might have some that would just not even take it seriously because you don't have a buffer in between.
Yeah, that makes sense because it feels more like your own ego.
Yeah.
Where are you active? Where should people follow you if they want more?
My name is Holly Meyer Lucas, 3 words. You can find me on all the things. I feel like if you just search Holly Meyer Lucas on anything, you can find me there.
Yeah, and it seems like you're pretty active on Instagram, and you tie back a lot of stuff in there. Like you have all your different other things going on in your profile. So
yeah, I will say this is like maybe some piece of advice for any listener that if you want to try to get in touch with someone like me, and I feel like you can echo this, sending a DM is amazing to like start a quick like chat conversation, whatever. But if you're serious about hiring or engaging with that person, so if you want to attend one of our real estating workshops, if you're interested in having a chief of staff placement, or if you're interested in engaging with Hype Boss, on those websites, there are ways to submit your formal inquiry. The biggest reason why I'm saying this is because we were talking about this in the middle of the show about delegating. It's so hard to delegate from Instagram DMs. Like I'm constantly screenshotting, and I'll lose it, like, cause they get buried and Instagram is so bad at the search function. So I'll lose the name of the thing. I won't, like, querying my email inbox is totally different than in DM. So blah, blah, blah. Long story short, if you have sent me a DM and I haven't responded, or like it's literally because it's gone. Like, it, yeah, if you're serious about hiring or inquiring about anything, and this is true for all over the internet, do the DM for the quick chat, but follow up on the system that they use. Right?
Yeah.
Do you have the same problem? I feel like it's
Yeah. No, it's correct. Instagram, like, because you go back and forth with friends, people respond to things, like, it
yeah,
just gets lost in the mess, and you don't necessarily have someone just monitoring your DMs. Like, you might like look back on your email more business wise. So
yeah, yeah, totally. And you can't delete like with emails. So like DM threads from like my, and this is true for most entrepreneurs. Like my personal page is the same page I had since college, basically. Like I'm not going to delete the entire thread with my friend and then give access to an employee.
yeah.
Meta has but with an email, like my emails are professional and clean because nobody's sending me random DMs from 2010.
Yeah.
It's just
So
messy, man.
last question. What does world-class leadership mean to you?
Oh, world-class leadership to me is having a safe and in control ego. Getting comfy with your ego and keeping it at bay, and having your ego be safe, and meaning safe for other people to give you feedback, to tell you things, for you to not respond passive aggressively, like whatever it is that like, because as a leader, the thing that makes us leaders, I think, is having a very strong ego and a strong sense of purpose. So with that comes typically a strong ego. So I think the best leaders, the world class leaders, are the ones that have their egos in control the most.
I want to thank you and say that you are pioneering leadership. You're the next generation of leadership that I kind of see along the lines of like people like Stephen Bartlett, who's bigger in the UK, but like really pioneering what does leadership actually look like in this next generation. So I want to thank you, and thank you for
Thank you
your
so much for
time.
saying that. That was so sweet. Thank you so much for saying that. It was such a pleasure. This was such a great conversation. I appreciate how prepared you were and are for this. Like it's so refreshing that you're not freestyling. Um,
Yeah.
it's frustrating as a guest when I don't know where we're headed, or when you don't like the jumping off point, the way that you ask your questions. If anyone's listening to this who is a podcast host or wants to start a podcast, the way that Andrew frames the questions gives so much incredible direction to like to make me feel like he has researched who I am and like where I'm going to head with my answer. There's a safety there with like being okay with being vulnerable. You're really,
Yeah.
really good at it. Like major props.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I try really hard to like, I value your time, and I know like the time you're spending with me is extremely valuable. So like the biggest thing that I could do is at least be well researched and like know how to kind of take the conversation, because the last thing I want to be is just like another podcast telling the same old story that's like, you're just like, I've said this like 17 times.
I'm telling you, it shows. It shows. You asked me at least 5 questions that I had never been asked before that were really, I literally asked you if AI was giving them to you, because they were such good questions. And it's not lost on me that like content these days is king. And like, with the way that podcasts, like, it's almost like you want to get like the guest licks in for, whatever it is that they're promoting, or, but then getting into something interesting, like that's what I care about, like I want to have a good
Yep.
conversation. So thank you.